What if I told you that more than 12 million African souls were forced onto ships, and nearly 2 million never saw land again? Not soldiers, not criminals. Mothers, fathers, children, entire bloodlines, ripped from villages that still remember their names. For over 400 years, the ocean between Africa and the Americas became a graveyard with no tombstones. And then, one day, the ships began to stop. But the story of how that ending came and what it cost is one of the most painful and most important chapters Africa has ever lived. Welcome to African Storyverse. Before we begin, subscribe to African Storyverse and click the notification bell, because every week we uncover the forgotten giants who shaped Africa and the wounds the world tried to bury. Between the early 1500s and the late 1800s, historical records document roughly 12.5 million Africans loaded onto ships for the Americas. About 10.7 million arrived alive. Nearly 1.8 million died in the Middle Passage of disease, thirst, despair, or the sea itself. To most people, those are numbers in a textbook. To Africa, they were sons who never came home, daughters whose lullabies ended mid-song, elders who watched the horizon until their eyes failed. This was not one trade, it was a system. European demand for sugar, cotton, tobacco, and gold turned human life into cargo. Coastal forts became machines of separation. The interior became hunting ground, not only by foreign raiders, but sometimes by rival kingdoms, pressed, paid, or corrupted into the same economy of flesh. To the merchant, a person was profit. To a mother in the interior, that same person was everything she had left in the world. And Africa paid in more than bodies. It paid in emptied villages, broken trust between neighbors, lost craftsmen, farmers, healers, storytellers, the living architecture of civilizations. From Gorée Island to Elmina, from Cape Coast to Ouidah, from Luanda to ports whose names history tried to whisper away. Stone walls held the last goodbye. Iron doors closed on the last glimpse of home, and the Atlantic opened like a wound that would not close for centuries. But here's the surprising truth. The Atlantic trade is the one the world remembers. It is not the only wound. For centuries longer, East Africa bled through another network, the Indian Ocean and Red Sea routes, with Zanzibar rising as a notorious hub. Men were marched, women and children were sold into domestic and military bondage across distant shores. Chains clinked on coral stone long after Western textbooks closed the chapter. Historians still debate exact totals for that Eastern trade. Records were thinner, older, harder to count. What is not debated is this: African suffering was not limited to one ocean, one empire, or one century. And that is why this story must be told with honesty, not to shame one people, but to refuse the lie that Africa's pain was simple. Africa was not only a victim of history, Africa also fought it. Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba stood against Portuguese expansion and the machinery of the slave trade for decades, negotiating, resisting, refusing to let her people be erased without a fight. In Dahomey, rulers at different moments both participated in and attempted to restrain the trade, proof that African politics were never a single story, but a storm of power, survival, and moral struggle. And across the water, a formerly enslaved African named Olaudah Equiano picked up a weapon more dangerous than a musket to some empires: the truth written down. His testimony helped shift consciences in Britain, proving that resistance could also be a pen, a voice, a refusal to be silent. Every sunrise brought another capture. Every sunset left another family incomplete. And still, some refused to surrender the idea that a human being is not merchandise. the strongest fortress is not always stone. Sometimes it is a people who remember who they are. If this story is opening something in you, a grief, a pride, a hunger to know more, like this video. It tells the algorithm that Africa's real history still matters. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. These stories only live if we keep telling them. So how did it end? Not in one clean moment. Not because the world suddenly became kind overnight. It ended in layers. Moral awakening, economic change, political pressure, naval enforcement, rebellion, and the stubborn insistence of abolitionists, black and white, African and European, enslaved and free. In 1807, Britain passed the Abolition of the Slave Trade Act, making it illegal for British ships to traffic enslaved Africans. That did not free those already in bondage. It struck the supply line. In 1833, the Slavery Abolition Act began dismantling slavery across much of the British Empire. Still incomplete, still compromised, still leaving scars, but a legal earthquake all the same. Other powers moved slower, some moved only when forced. Cuba abolished slavery in 1886. Brazil, the last major American nation in that system, abolished it in 1888. In East Africa, the legal end came even later. In parts of the region, slavery was not fully abolished until the early 20th century, around 1909, in key East African contexts, long after the Atlantic story had been declared over. To most people, abolition looks like a single date on a plaque. To the enslaved, freedom arrived the way rain arrives in drought, unevenly, late for some, never fully for others. And we must say this with clear eyes. Laws ended the legal trade. They did not instantly heal stolen childhoods, erased languages, or the silence left at empty dinner fires. Freedom on paper is not the same as justice in the heart of a people. When the last legal slave ship stopped, the wound did not vanish. It changed shape. It became broken families across oceans. It became economies built on stolen labor. It became stereotypes designed to justify what should never have been justified. It became a diaspora that carried Africa in music, faith, language, and memory, even when the homeland was only a story told in whispers. But here's what the traders never understood. You can steal a body. You cannot fully steal a people's soul. Africa survived. The diaspora survived. The names they tried to bury are being spoken again. And every time we tell this history with dignity, without softening it, without weaponizing it, without lying about its complexity, we do something sacred. We return the stolen, the one thing empire could not permanently take: their story. So the next time someone reduces Africa to a footnote, or pretends this history was simple, or claims the past has nothing to do with the present, remember the 12 million. Remember the nearly 2 million who never arrived. Remember the mothers who waited. Remember the queens who fought. Remember the writers who refused silence. Remember that abolition was not mercy from above alone. It was pressure, conscience, resistance, and time colliding. Because sometimes the greatest chapters of history are the ones most people have never been taught. And Africa's story was never only about what was taken. It is also about what refused to die. If this story moved you, like this video, subscribe to African Storyverse and click the notification bell, because Africa's greatest stories are only just beginning. We remember them, so the world cannot forget.